Good afternoon, everyone on the call, and thank you for joining us on this session that we're about to do about user adoption. We're just going to give it another sort of 30 seconds for one or two people to continue to join who we know are trying to join. So we will start in, say, about 30 seconds. Right, I think we seem to have a good complement now, which is great. So again, thank you very much for your time this afternoon and in joining us for this in our second in a series of webinars looking at the user adoption aspects of the journey to UC. We have tried to build this series around what we call the journey to UC, which picks up on various aspects that most organizations will encounter when looking to make the sort of travel journey to unified communications and collaboration. It could be that you are anywhere on this journey and it doesn't really stop, it continues as you move forward. And it might be that you're continually using Lync already for something like our instant message and presence. If you're looking to grow that and develop it further, then again, this will be very useful for you as well. In terms of this particular session, as I say, we're looking at the user adoption strategies. We will very much focus on the value and best practices of user adoption, how important that it is. I think in a lot of cases, user adoption is often seen or deemed as being something tantamount to just training. And I think over the next 20-30 minutes, we will explain to you how important user adoption is and expand upon that and elaborate just a little bit more as to where the whole user adoption story fits. It's a very important factor, very underestimated in many projects. And we've seen a lot of cases where user adoption has been the cause for projects to either stall or at worst actually fail. Today, you have your speakers today as myself, which is Ian Guest. I'm head of marketing here at Modality, but leading the discussions will be Tom Scott, our head of user adoption. Tom has had a lot of experience in dealing at the front end with customer activities, ranging from support through to user adoption, so much so that he's obviously now heading up our activity within Modality. So he does have a lot of experience, a lot of bruises to call upon to help share your best practices with you of what he's learned over the time. If you have any questions as we go through, if you'd like to ping them in the tool that you have within the window, and we'll try and handle those at the end. So without further ado, I want to hand over to Tom, who will start to talk you through the best practices for user adoption.
Thank you, Ian. Good afternoon, everyone. The idea of today is for me to share with you, as Ian said, the benefit of my bruises in a way. So from starting delivering just user training to people, I've built up quite an array of experience around various ways to deploy Lync, various circumstances, and it's really to give you an overview of user adoption, which is a very controversial view of mine, but I believe it's more important than the technical side of it, which I can assure you doesn't go down particularly well at our consultant meetings. But to start with, I'm going to talk you through kind of the traditional pitfalls that we've seen in user adoption and deploying Lync. So this isn't one particular person or anything specific. It's just kind of something that we've put together that is almost a view and things that we've seen that haven't worked. So the idea that one size fits all is something that we have seen and I've seen people try to deploy where kind of a headset or one type of device or one way of using and deploying Lync has been pushed out to everybody. I'm sure you know that, and I'll go on to detail this later in the discussion. But around deployment, especially around devices, it really can't be one size fits all. It's very much a case that analysis has to be done. You have to work with people to see what device works for them, what training and various deployment methods work for them, and that can depend on the different cultures, different businesses as well. So that in terms of examples, just very quickly, and I'm not going to do this for all of them, don't worry, but the one that springs to mind was that it's a decision taken that everybody has a headset that works with Lync. In reality, after that's been done, after that was done, we realised that certain people were not willing to or not able to rely on their PC for telephony. They needed to have that backup method to be able to make calls, to be able to receive calls as well. One of the key, in terms of user engagement, one of the key themes that we see coming back to people in terms of negative bits from Lync is where people within businesses perceive it as being led by IT, which it's not a slight on any of us here on the call. It's just a case of the fact that people feel that the change is being forced upon them, where they don't really have much choice in the matter. It's something they don't quite understand the benefits of, and they just see it almost as IT forcing the change on them without being engaged with them. And then that leads to a perception of it doesn't work. This is one of the things that we run into a lot of the time, where people are not sure of the behaviour of Lync. They're not sure. They expect it to work like a PBX phone system, and they're not 100% sure of how things will work differently here. And that perception naturally leads to them thinking, oh goodness, this doesn't work. They call support people or the support teams there, and if they haven't had the sufficient training and the skills given to them to be able to support them, it makes for a culture of people thinking it doesn't work and then ultimately just not using it, which from a user adoption point of view is kind of the thing we really want to avoid.
I think that just adding in there, Tom, as well, I think it's very much important that those first impressions matter. I know you can apply that to a lot of scenarios, but first impressions, if you have that negativity instantly and that perception is of the wrong level, it's very difficult, or it's 10 times harder to actually win that round, is what we see a lot.
Absolutely. It's one of the key things, or one of the things we've seen when deploying Lync for the first time, is that those first few days are crucial when people are using it, because if they obviously there's an element of change in there, but if, as you say, if people perceive it that it doesn't work, then it's kind of a constant battle then to try and win them round, to try and get over that. Whereas if the same thing or the same error happened, say 3 or 4 months down the line, once Lync's been adopted, it's a lot more palatable for people. They think, oh, it's not. They're more patient in terms of it being fixed if it is an issue, and also they're more patient in terms of maybe changing their working practices to suit it. But as you said, absolutely, the first impressions are, like everything, are key, especially with Lync. And then in terms where we've written wrong culture here, it's more around setting expectations for Lync, in that if Lync is communicated out as just a replacement phone system, then you're going to see that it doesn't work like a traditional PBX. There's some key functionality that's not there, and that then will mean that people again perceive that it doesn't work, and that it doesn't work as they say it will, and that's also driven by not being communicated down from the top. So in terms of no business support, we're just referring to where, again, it's been driven by IT. That the business have with Lync is where they see it for the first time and it's rolled out to them. And if that is to the exec staff as well, then they're instantly going to challenge and question why this has been put in, which again puts us on the back foot when trying to get people to use it.
I think that's quite a key point with any project really around unified communications, Skype for Business, Lync, whatever. I think it is getting that business buy-in, that business sponsor, because if you have that, it doesn't become a silo project anymore. You get the sponsorship at a senior level to help drive through some of the change, and we are talking about a change here. So that's quite a key point.
Exactly. We've seen a couple of instances where companies have not had that senior buy-in, and it's the difference is really remarkable between those where the messages are communicated out by or on behalf of one of the senior exec staff, compared to ones where the senior exec staff are actually questioning what's been put in, because ultimately it's a top down. If it's bought into at the top, then it filters down a lot easier to people using it beneath them. So this slide, again, in terms of making it happen, this is from a user adoption point of view, the way I see Skype for Business being implemented, and the change that goes on, in that once the infrastructure is built and the keys have been handed over, the change for Skype for Business is actually 80% on the people side, rather than the technical side. Again, the IT guys here will challenge me on this. But the focus should be for us is communicating out to people that Lync's coming, on how to use the system, and then also to make them aware of the benefits of Skype for Business. So what we found is that just telling people that change is coming, that this is a new system, it works in a different way, people are a lot more reluctant to adopt it if they're not aware of the benefits to it. So it's very much an attitude with people of what's in it for me. So what we found is that by reaching out, engaging with the business, communicating to them the messages of Lync, the benefits it brings to them. Sorry, not Lync, Skype for Business. I'm still trying to get my head around the change. It's been 2.5 years of calling it Lync. But it's ultimately making people aware of the benefits of that, and then once people see the benefits and they see why we're implementing it, then that change is a lot easier to adopt for them.
I think just to elaborate that further as well, what we're talking about with any UCC project is a change in the way we're working. It's not just a technology deployment. It is very much a change in ways of practice, ways of working. We're seeing a lot more mobile ways of working at the moment, home working, etc. So we are changing the norm for people. 5 or 6 years ago, it would have been normal for people to travel into work every day and work from one place. There's a real trend with the internet, cloud technologies and mobile technologies to be able to now work pretty much where you'd like. So the whole driver that we're seeing for unified communications is about improving that collaboration, which is a marked change, and hence when Tom talks here about only 20% of any project being really technology based, yes, it is a controversial statement, but what we're talking about is putting something in place which actually affects users and the people, and that's why the 80% of it needs to be strategies around enabling the people.
Absolutely, and it's also as well about changing people's views and perception in terms of the knowledge of how Lync works. That people's perception would be that if people traditionally aren't in the office, then it is seen that they're not contactable, and they're kind of working remotely. Whereas the whole aspect of changing the culture within an organisation, moving to Skype for Business, is that we change that perception of people, that actually if Lync is deployed and everybody's using it, then you can communicate with them via Lync as you can if they're in the office. So it's changing the way people work, and also their perception, and also their kind of confidence in the fact that they can use Lync Skype for Business to contact people outside when they're working remotely.
So if we move forward then and have a look at what some of the best practices are with user adoption, I think we're going to walk you through this in terms of a journey, keeping the journey theme going. So Tom, what do we do in the beginning?
Right. So the key point from myself, or one of the first things, is to start the adoption process early, in terms of in parallel for when building the Skype for Business infrastructure, then start to analyse people's current telephony usage in terms of what the culture is out there, how people currently work, how people manage their calls, is voicemail widely used. All these different things to know how people currently work at the moment will give you an idea of how much the change to Skype for Business is going to affect people. To give you an example, many PBX systems have a group pickup button. So So you could hear a phone ringing and you press *3 or *5 and answer that phone. You don't know which one it is, but it allows everybody in the office then to be able to answer a phone if it's ringing. If that's widely used across the company, then we need to set people's expectations that that's not something that's going to be automatically configured for them. It's something that they're going to have to do themselves. And then that's where the education piece comes into it, to be able to communicate out to them how they set that up, and also use it as an opportunity to sell the features, to say that yes, this is a tool that allows you to work flexibly, but it also allows you to control and set your call forwarding settings in this instance based on where you're working and the circumstances that you're working in. So really you can't start that early enough, because it will also give you a picture then of what your user base is like, and then will also allow you to build out the rest of your deployment plan based on that, and capture any requirements that you might not have thought were needed at the start of the project. I guess in terms of defining success and to understand goals, the main question I would ask or use for this is to just say, why Lync? Why Skype for Business? So the main purpose being is that what is the goal, or what are we putting it in for? So this would help shape communications out to people. So in terms of, if we're using Skype for Business as a collaboration tool to promote meetings and allow people to join and have easier conference calls, maybe to reduce travel, then again, that's going to shape a major part of our communications out to people, our training, and also, I'll come on to this at the end of the project, then to something tangible to measure against. Again, if it's as a telephony replacement, then we need to understand that. We need to make sure that all of the current requirements are met, and then when people move over to Skype for Business, then they continue to work and are not hindered by the change. So it's really kind of working out why we're putting Lync in, and then tailoring the adoption based on that. Gaining executive sponsorship for Lync is crucial, because if somebody senior is seen to be backing the project and is almost going out to people and saying, I'm using this, then you should, then it gives the project instant credibility, and is also seen as the IT project working with the business to put something in, as opposed to not inflicting is the wrong word, but making sure that giving it to people, or just putting it in people the way that IT think it should work, rather than taking that knowledge from the business. Throughout the project, it's worth definitely engaging and working with a business analyst or a change management specialist to focus on the impact of Lync to the organisation, and also then look at what is going to change, what are the key areas that we need to focus on in terms of communication, awareness sessions, identifying people who are going to need more assistance and more time moving over to Skype for Business, and also be able to advise on all the different functionality within the tool. So to know everything that we've got available to help move people over and match their current telephony requirements over to what can be appropriate in Skype for Business. And in terms of engaging influential users, this helps you then define your planning that you're doing for the rollout. So by influential users, these can, and I'm generalizing here, can be identified as the people who are your intense phone users, so executive assistants, receptionists, exec staff. In some instances, there may be some heavy call or helpline users. So really guys who use telephony as part of their day-to-day jobs, who are going to not only help shape the technical requirements of your rollout, but will also give you the almost things that we didn't think of, ways, examples of behavior. They can help suggest communications and again help that buy-in, that kind of publicity, which is essential when rolling this out. And then once you've spoken to those, it can help you define your plan to realise, well, who's going to take longer, how much training are we going to do for them, based on that feedback you get from your core, your influential users or your stakeholders within the project.
I think it can also help you refine the goals that you're setting in the first place as the objectives for the project, because I think if you have those users in place and they can embrace it, they will bring new ideas to the table as well. So what you're actually building is something that was actually designed around the requirements of the business, rather than, like we see all too often, a siloed approach from an IT-led type project. And that's completely understandable when you think where we've come from over the last few years, but where projects have been led by an IT team to see, this is the latest technology, how can it work? Not really sure what it's going to do for us, we'll test it. Then they try and push it into an organisation, and we've had plenty of examples where this has happened, only to find that it kind of falls on its face very early on. So I think these are all very key early on stages, and it reinforces the fact that really user adoption is a lot more than training. It's not just an afterthought at go live. Really start planning and thinking about your users at a very early stage.
Yes, absolutely. And the influential users and the guys that you're engaging with now ultimately help facilitate that change over to Skype for Business, in that you can help through them get good publicity, and as we spoke about first impressions in the previous slide, help then for people to shape those through word of mouth, through any other communication methods within the firm. So moving on, we're talking about user adoption, so naturally all our focus is on the user here. In terms of creating user profiles, it really helps if you have a group of 4 or 5 profiles that you can put people within the organization into, because it really helps your tailor your communication, your training material, your rollout strategy, and the levels of support that are going to be needed. To give an example, someone who works, it helps choose devices for people and peripherals, in that someone who works 9 to 5 or around about those times, but is office based, is based at a PC on the desk, then they're going to be able to use a kind of more decked headset that's a bit bulkier, that's connected to them, that always stays in the same place. Against someone who works remotely, whose device requirements are going to be something a lot smaller, portable, that they can take around with them. It seems obvious to say it here, but just being able to identify those differences between people, again, allows people to get the most out of the system, is more engagement with the business, and also allows you to get feedback as well from them, and for them to get off on the right foot with Skype for Business.
So it's about really painting the picture of what that person does in those type of roles, so what that profile of user is. Absolutely.
So is reaching out to the business in some instances to find out, well, what they do on a day-to-day basis, where they work, kind of, and what sort of telephony they use, and then being able to tailor their communications and the kind of the training material that you send out to them to make it relevant to them. I mean, one of the and it's almost my heart sinks every time I hear it when I show someone one of the things that the cool bits of Skype for Business, so being able to share a desktop, drag someone into a conference call, all those cool bits, and they just look at it and say, oh, I don't think I'd ever use that. And it's being able to kind of give that user profile and then give them context to be able to show, well, this is how other people in your same situation are using it. Do you think this could work? To give you an example, we recently deployed persistent chat somewhere, and it wasn't taken up hardly at all until we put out a case study to show that there was a group, a team within. It was a national-based organisation, and they had in Lync 2010. They had a group conversation that they would just start every day. And then it was the idea being that they were all working in different sites. They could all remote into it, they could all type into it, and we identified persistent chat as a tool for them to use, gave the context, and then passed that over to other teams who work in exactly the same way for them to use as well. So it kind of helped us out by having that profile. We knew who else might benefit from that same functionality. The idea of champions within the business is a very important one. I'm just trying to think of the best way to say it. When using internal communication, so Yammer, for example, you always want to get good press from Skype for Business, and whereas all the online media tools, Yammer, for example, are great ways of getting good publicity for people, for tools as well, that they also give a sounding board for people, almost a vent in a way. So if you have business champions and influential users within the business, it's people who can almost be champions on that as well. So they can push out, so they can be a source of knowledge for people, but also be a face within the business who isn't IT, for people to look at and say, well, they're using it, and for them actually to say, no, it's okay, and almost to fight that fire sometimes that you get when any change is put in of negative press. They also allow, you can also use the champions as early adopters, so people who will be able to then go out to the business and let us know what's working, us to be able to test things, us to be able to kind of push out new ideas and get some feedback before going out to the wider community. The champions as well also allow us to understand and analyze how people work out there within those various user profiles. So what that allows us then to do is map their old functionality to how it will work in Lync, so it's Skype for Business again, and then basically for us to be able to see, well, what works, what is going to need to be changed, and then communicate that out as appropriate. Where functionality is different in terms of the group pickup example that we used before, it's essential to communicate the benefits as well as the fact that it works differently. To give you the team call group idea, the benefit of team call group over group pickup that we found in this instance is the fact that you can pick, yes, you can, it rings everybody at the same time, but you can pick up team call groups when working from home or working in a different office, which you can't do with group pickup. So there is a change in behavior, but we communicated the benefits out, and it actually works better for them than group pickup did.
I think there's a great example there with one of our large financial customers, where the project actually it struggled for a little while, predominantly because it was led from an IT stance. But one thing that the key contact there, who was in the IT team, who was driving this project forward, one thing he recognized was that some of the key influencing people and the early adopters, which were amongst the PA type team, were used to using certain terminology, like line pickups, etc., secretarial groups. And of course, that is a slightly different way of working when you introduce, well, it was Lync at the time, now Skype for Business. So he had to go through a process of, this is what you used to call it, this is what it's now called, this is what it means, and this is how it works for you. So he really went down to a very basic level with that group of users. And in doing that, taking that effort to do that, he really won them over and released what was becoming a bit of a blockage within the system for progress.
Absolutely, and it was very much around the case that they were under the users, the executive assistants using Skype for Business were under the impression that it would just work in the same way that their old phone system did, because that they hadn't been that communicated out to them. But upon revisiting it and kind of sitting down with them and explaining, well, this is how it works differently, this is why it works like this, and these are the benefits of it, then it went a long way to winning them over, to show them the benefits of it. And that kind of is that theme is consistent with the best way that we've seen Lync and Skype for Business adopted, in that we've seen people actually explain the benefits of it. This is how it works now, this is what it means for you. And then once that people have seen that benefit, it makes the change a lot more palatable to them, and they're willing to then work with us to get to the stage of everybody using it.
And of course, what it also does, it enables you who are running the project to actually design and refine the system design to actually build something which works for the users. It's built for the users, not.
Absolutely. It's also gives us a chance to refine any training material that we've put out. So it was adding context to showing people this is how you set up a team core group, but adding context to that to say this is where you would use it. So it's very much that case of this is how to use it rather than what it actually does.
So that moves us on from the very early stage type activities to what is quite a key point that is often underestimated in a lot of these projects, which is the cultural change.
Absolutely, it's something that has come about through 18 months of bruises, for want of a better explanation. But it's very much around being sensitive to the way people react to change within work, and specifically around what the current culture within the organisation is. It's changing to Lync from a traditional PBX is a fundamental change to the way that people work. As Ian said before, there was 5 or 6 years ago the tradition, the norm was that people would go into the office, they would sit at the desk, and their phone would be the hunk of plastic attached to the desk, and the number would be the number attached to that phone. And if you weren't there, if you're working remotely, then there was no way to get that call. So what Skype for Business allows people to do now is to work from home, work wherever they can sign into the client. It also opens up things such as federation, online meetings, and external parties, which again is all great functionality, but the change, that cultural change, needs to be communicated through the business. It's a big change in mindset and people's attitudes to change. So as the documentation here shows that the originator are the small percentage, or the kind of our friends of IT who are prefer expansive change, right down to the conservers who are very much set in their ways. They've been very successful in the way that they've worked for the last 20 years with the traditional phone, and have that kind of the phone's not broke, so why fix it mentality, which are a lot of the times the people that we focus on bring along with us on the Skype for Business journey. What I've found, and I'm not at all going to declare myself an expert on this because there's a lot of research done on change management. I'm not going to expose myself to not knowing enough. But one of the things I've noticed, particularly that I've noticed that is particularly relevant to Lync and the way that Lync's deployed, is the nudge theory. So again, in very layman's terms, the nudge theory is very much a kind of understanding people's behaviours and how they think, and then almost nudging them in the right way to change their behaviour. So an example would be that to reduce littering, in a completely abstract example, but to reduce littering, a forced change would be to put up big signs that say "do not litter," whereas a nudge change would be to make bins more visible and put more bins there, which will nudge people to think, oh, there's more bins, I can put litter in the bin. So it's very much, I think, the way to deploy Skype for Business successfully is very much this nudge mentality, in terms of not coming in and forcing the change, but then explaining to people, well, this is how it could work, it opens up this, this and this, and then almost encourage them to get on board with us. In terms of examples for this with Lync, it's very much a case of showing people some of the suggested benefits to show that you can do this, that also to make Lync visible to them, to be able for people to say, oh, well, if I see Lync with a headset, then that means that I could use that, and then naturally leads on to think, well, I could use that working remotely, working anywhere. I don't necessarily have to be in the office, which is compared to almost a forced thing of Lync, of saying, well, it's a Lync, it's a phone system, here's your phone, and crack on with it. It's just I have to declare, it's just my idea with it. I'm learning about nudge theory. I don't know anywhere near enough to go into extensive detail on it. But it's a very nice challenge for being able to nurture a conducive culture for change, and also challenge that thing of people saying, we have always done it this way. In that a lot of times, this is where you have to balance with the nudge theory, is being able to say to them, well, why do you always do it that way? And asking that a lot of times, it's been a limitation of the current PBX system that they've had. It just so happens they've had that for 15, 20 years, so that's become the norm. And it's also trying to balance and almost tell them that this is what people would like, but it's not necessarily what's best with Lync. And it's trying to portray that and communicate that effectively. To give you an example, one of our customers that we've deployed for had a no voicemail policy, in that no phone was ever allowed to go to voicemail. And this was that was communicated out, and it was kind of accepted throughout the practice. And upon research, it was because that the main reason was that they weren't confident that everybody had a voicemail account. So we were able to say, well, if you get Lync, we can guarantee you will get Lync and a voicemail account, and your calls will go to voicemail unless you go and change something. And once communicated that, they were happy to change the way that they worked, because we could say this is how Lync voicemail works and showed the benefits of it, but it challenged that attitude of, we've always done it this way, it's worked for us for this long, why do we need to change? So those can be difficult conversations to have, but it's almost the nudge theory allows you to do it nicely and get people on board with you, as opposed to just walking in and saying, we're going voicemail, you've got to go voicemail with Lync, which instantly gets people's backs up, people will get defensive, and then the change is a lot more difficult to implement.
So it's about understanding that cultural aspect. It's about what do you have to do to the different groups of users, because there's a different propensity to change throughout the organisation. So there are different strategies to different user groups, and it's how you nurture them through this process and take them on the journey with you so that they get the most out of it. And it may be that you can't do that all in one hit. It has to be done in small chunks, releasing perhaps some of the functionality to certain people, or a series of different types of refresh training, depending on where they are on that journey. But trying to change behavior, trying to show them the value of doing it, keeping it as a positive change.
Yeah, absolutely. And getting people to work with you to adopt it, as opposed to restricting it or to fighting it. Yeah. So throughout the deployment, the glass slipper we're referring to here, for example, is endpoints. It's almost the Goldilocks thing that we want to find for everybody, to be able to say, well, this is the one that works for you. This is and give examples of why. So, for example, as we noted with the headsets, tailoring headsets aimed at specific user profiling will help to shape that. With having a marketing campaign to communicate and promote the Skype for Business change is essential, to have a clear message of why we're moving to that, and then also user profiling, being able to identify those groups allows you to tailor that and promote it effectively to those guys. Also being able to promote Lync, so running things like model offices to let people come and see and have a play with Lync. To be able for them to see the headsets, the different devices, and kind of how it works is essential to get people's fear away of the unknown, and also by involving the champions and speaking to the business and engaging the business, you can get initial feedback, what the general feel is, and help to shape that and help to mould that throughout the deployment.
I think it helps you to also identify any objections or any challenges along the way, so you can address those at a very early stage. If you're involving people in the journey, you're taking them with you. You're not going to be able to bring everyone with you, but by tackling it as part of a campaign, starting early, communicating, you're removing as Tom says, the fear of uncertainty. You're also if you can put a positive spin on all of the activities that are going on and what it means to them and the value, then that will all help down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. It takes out as many. I mean, ultimately, there's always going to be there's going to be a learning curve. There's going to be time for people to become as comfortable with Skype for Business as they have been with a phone they've been using for 10 years, for example. But it just helps eliminate as many risks and as many potential pitfalls as possible. And also, one of the main things that I've seen personally that where people have come unstuck, or things people have not thought about, is terms of compliance and policy and governance around Lync. So if we're using Lync as a communications method, then it's thoughts around sensitive data. Can that be communicated through Lync? What sort of guidelines are we going to give people in terms of how to use it, how to use instant messages, where that sits apart from Yammer and SharePoint, if those tools are used as well, and also just acts as a reassurance to people that it's not being monitored, that it's not kind of us trying to trip you up with presents to see when you're available. It just kind of alleviates those fears as well.
Well, I think the governance and policies is also a very key point to highlight here, because that ties back to your objectives for the project. Because I mean, a classic example we have was one of the fire and rescue teams that we work with. They wanted to reduce their travel expenses, was one of the key drivers for them. So they needed to bring some governance and some policy in place to affect the behaviour of people. So they did come up with some policies around what you travel for and what you don't travel for. They saw so much benefits, they extended that. But not only did they extend it, it wasn't forcing it onto the users, because the users saw the benefit as well of not having to spend so much time stuck on motorways and travelling between various sites. So they were happy to accept it, and they made some, well, double the savings that they were expecting to make on that one key measurable. So think about the policies and you put in place to try and change behaviour. And when you think of if there's home working, if there is mobile working and that sort of thing in place, that there are certain policies and governance that you might need to change, because the organisation might be steeped in a traditional way of working, which is people need to be at their desk. That needs to change. So having changes in policies might help to then push that through the organisation.
Yes, definitely. To give you another example, one of the financial firms that we work with have rules and regulations around where they can save client data. So if Skype for Business is going to be adopted, then that would have to be reviewed in line with that, as it's a new communication tool that's being brought into the working environment.
So this is the moment when I think most people think of user adoption, which is that go live part. I think this is where traditionally people think training. As we've hopefully demonstrated, you need to think about it a little early, but there are things you need to consider at this go live point.
Absolutely. The work that we've done previously leads us up to this point in a way, so it will tell us what training is required, who's going to need more support, how Skype for Business is going to be deployed to them. So it's very much a case of using as many training varieties as possible. So for example, classroom, desk side training, digital training, again, understanding the culture, the user profiling, to be able to know who's going to react well to classroom-based training, whereas contrasting against who's going to adapt well to going and finding for themselves. In terms of, there's no better way to communicate Skype for Business functionality than using that to push out training material once people have gone live. But again, it's more around having a clear presence, so floor walkers, drop-in clinics for the project to say that we've put this in. We're almost fronting up in a way to show, here we are, if you've got any problems, help us, we can get that sorted for you. And also once you've gone live with it and you've people have started using Lync, it's a chance to revisit your goals and then measure using a series of the analysis reports on there. If one of our goals was increased conferencing, how many conference calls are we making? And then use that as a way to actually, well, we can tailor more training material, we can push that out, we can adapt the comms on it. So it's very much an organic process of seeing how people are using it and then reacting as appropriately.
I think there's There's also the element of making sure that your support teams are up to speed and being able to support and handle the questions that are likely to come in from end users, because again, it's that first impression, as you need to get that experience correct at the point of them going live. You need to keep it positive, you need to keep that momentum going. So don't stop with just on go live, give that support ongoing, measure and monitor it and refresh the training. It might be that you phase it because people won't learn everything all in one go. And encourage people to play with it, encourage people to try and almost break it so that they get used to experiencing all the functionality or adventurous. And if you get some early wins where you actually see people using it and you see some good working practices, again, communicate it, promote that throughout the business so that others can learn from that as well.
Again, it helps break down the thing to hear that if it's communicated from IT, then again, some people might see it as IT inflicting something on it, but if people see their peers using Skype for Business, and this is how someone in the same job as me uses it, we've seen people a lot more willing to adapt it and to change in line with that.
So that brings us to the end of really the best practices as we've walked you through that journey. And if we just recall back to the slide that we put up initially, some of the pitfalls that you see, hopefully we've talked through some of these points here. So the one size fits all. It's about understanding your user profile, about making sure that you don't enforce certain technologies or endpoints on them, giving them a choice, thinking quality as well. That's another important point with the endpoints. Don't just go for cheap. Making sure that you involve them, don't make it just an IT-led project. Don't force the change on them and get some business support in there so that you actually have an executive sponsor. And make sure that your people that are supporting the process are also skilled and know what to do and have the adequate training themselves. And a quick takeaways.
Absolutely. So really, the four key one here, I guess, user adoption. It goes without saying, but the focus really is on the users at this point. Is finding out what is communicating with them, engaging with them, getting them on our side really to be able to introduce Skype for Business and make it a success. Again, start early, plan as much as possible, and the key one is don't stop when Lync's rolled out. Skype for Business is rolled out. There is the temptation of almost the relief that everybody's got it, that it's gone live. Continue the engagement, revisit it in a couple of months' time to see, are you using it, what are you struggling with, and then continue the engagement and the communications to follow that up. Recognizing the cultural change aspect is the most important in all of that, in my personal opinion, to understand what level of impact that it's going to have on the business, how much it's going to affect the change, and how much it's going to affect people's working as well. So what we want people to be able to do is be able to come in first day with Skype for Business and know what it is, ideally know how it works, and then begin to start using it in earnest and understand the benefits of it. But recognizing those cultural change aspects makes us able to identify how easy that's going to be. And finally, it's a lot more than just training. So there is a temptation just to give people a headset, a help guide, and say, crack on. But if that works, then great. But I've seen it fail a lot more times than necessary. So it's very much, again, around finding out what will work, research into the business, giving people within the business ownership of Lync to be able to say, look, we're putting this in for you. You tell us how it works, how you work, and then we can make this fit for you.
It's all about getting people to utilise the features and the functionality and the investment that you have for the greater gain of not only themselves but also for the greater gain of the business. You want them to be using it and maximising that utilisation.
Absolutely. The worst thing we could possibly have is that people see Skype for Business as a hindrance and then just revert to using their mobile, which means that people aren't using this as we've intended. We're not seeing the benefits of the project, why it was brought in, and the only thing we're seeing is increased mobile bills.
Okay. Thank you very much, Tom. I'm very conscious of time. We've allotted an hour for this, and I'm sure people are very appreciative of the fact that they're very busy. I'm not going to go through this particular slide in any detail, but I wouldn't be doing my job if I just didn't tell you a little bit about who Modality are. This is supposed to be an informative webinar, so I'm not going to dwell on the fact we are a Skype for Business global elite launch partner. So we do know a thing about this, a thing or two about the Skype for Business and UC. We've had plenty of experience. Our user adoption offering is an all-encompassing bundle of everything from the initial consultancy, adoption, the planning, the change advice, right the way through the training, the go live and beyond. So we try to cover that whole journey with everything. We sit down with clients, we understand what they're trying to achieve, and we come up with a bundled offering around user adoption, which starts very early in the process. So before I move on and close up, we've got one or two questions in. So quickly before we get that, and I'm only going to have chance, I think, for one, maybe two. So Tom, one's come in is, how do you set expectations for the mobile worker?
It really boils down to the fact that communicating, yes, you can log into Skype for Business wherever you can connect to the internet, but like all applications, you're at the mercy of the internet connection you're using. So it's really setting expectations that if you want to do a HD video presentation with external clients, it's best to use that in the scenario where you're on either a corporate network where Lync was designed for, or a very high performing broadband or domestic broadband, not a 3G connection on the train. And then really working through that way so that as Skype for Business becomes adopted into the organisation, people will then understand that. But it kind of negates a lot of bad press if you can tell people, look, actually, if you're working on instant messages, fine, when working using a 3G connection, but if you need to call someone, in that instance, it might be better to use the mobile phone connection just as a phone rather than through Lync. So it's again about identifying who's going to be used, who are the mobile workers, how they work, that user engagement, that user profiling to be able to, and that communication channels to be able to say, well, this is how it goes out to people, this is how you use it, and then communicate that out that way to them.
Yeah, there's not a lot we can do about that connectivity, although it is getting better and better as we move on.
No, exactly.
I'm looking at the time. I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap up. So if there are any more questions, there is in the next slide, which I will leave up, there is a ways of contacting us, so please send information through if you'd like to find out any more. Just to remind you, there's 2 further sessions in this particular series. The next one is on the 9th of July, where we assess the value of moving beyond instant message and presence, which I think accounts for probably 60 to 65% of all Lync installations in the marketplace. So again, what is that value for moving it and extending it further? Hot topic of the day. And then on the 2nd of July, we will be looking at how you can extend the value. So moving beyond just the out-of-the-box type scenarios of what more you can do. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you, Tom, for joining me today. On the screen now, or there will be very shortly, is the ways to contact us. So please, we look forward to your feedback, your questions. If there's anything else, other topics that you'd like to hear about, please let us know any feedback you have, and we can make sure that we can put a program in place which meets the requirements. Thank you very much, and goodbye.